Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
This week we start the story about Yosef and the brothers. A very painful episode in the Torah about how the 12 tribes throw their own brother into a pit, sell him into slavery, which leads to the whole story of this estrangement and then ultimately the reunification of the family. However, what was the seeds that caused this animosity and hatred amongst the brothers? So the very first verse of the Torah tells us that the genesis of this whole story was that Vayavei Yosef et dibasam ra'el avihem, that Yosef would tell tales about his brothers to his father. Yosef was not only the youngest son, but and the favorite son because he was the son of Rachel, and he was the son who made the coat. The father made the coat of many colors. So there was jealousy because of the favoritism shown by Jacob to Yosef, which our rabbis tell us never show favoritism to one child over another, because the one who's going to pay the price is the kid you showed the favoritism to. They're not going to resent the father for it. They're going to resent the kid who gets shown the favoritism. So you think you're helping that kid by showing him favoritism, you're hurting that kid, because you're going to make that child the brunt of the enmity of his brothers, as Yosef was hated by his brothers. But Yosef, so to speak, added fuel to the fire. He poured kerosene on the fire by not only being the favorite child, but running to his dad every time he saw the brothers do something wrong. He would tell tales to the father, Vayavei Yosef es dibasam ra'el avihem. And therefore that aggravated the brothers even more and incited them even more towards hatred, because he was a tattletailer. And here we have the sin of Lashon Hara, and we see how gossip and slander and speaking negatively could lead to very, very grave repercussions, as we see not only is Yosef sold into slavery, but the whole Jewish people went into slavery as a result of this episode, which begins with Lashon Hara, speaking negatively and evil about others. But here's the interesting question. It says, Vayavei Yosef es dibasam ra'ah, Yosef brought bad tales about the brothers, el avihem, to their father. Should have said he brought it to his father. It wasn't only their father, it was his father. So why does it say he brought negative tales to their father? It should have said el aviv, to his own father. And the answer is, when it comes to speaking Lashon Hara, there's two questions we have to ask ourselves. Because there are times you're allowed to speak negatively. And when is that? When you're doing it to help someone, to correct the situation. Certain things you have to report, certain incidents. Why? Because if you never tell someone what you encountered, what you saw, what you experienced, no action can be taken to remedy it. So there are some circumstances where it's permissible to relate something negative. But here's the point. The question you have to ask yourself is, what is my motivation? Is it purely to help the situation or the person? Or do I have some kind of a agenda here, that I have some ill will towards that person? And I'm not just saying it because I want to report a negative situation because I don't like it, but rather because I want to hurt this person in some way. So let's say you see someone's child doing something wrong, and you go to the father, look, I want to tell you, I saw your kid outside, he was smoking cigarettes or whatever. That's not Lashon Hara. You got to tell the father, you should know what his kid is doing, you should stop it, right? There's no bias, there's no personal motive here. You're not doing it for any personal gain. So if it would have said he told it to his father, you may think he was doing it because he wanted to curry favor with his father over his brothers. By saying to their father, it was objective. It was like you telling someone else about their child. It was his father, but he wasn't telling it because he wanted to win favor in his father's eyes over his brothers. He was doing it purely to help his brothers. So then what was the sin of Joseph? He was trying to help his brothers to get his father to stop their bad behavior. So the answer was that his mistake was that he misinterpreted what he saw. Even when you're doing it without any other ulterior motive and agenda, you're simply reporting something. The question is, are you sure what you saw is correct? Or maybe you're misunderstanding the circumstances and reporting something that someone said, they say, don't believe everything you see. Sometimes they say, don't believe everything you think, right? Just because you saw something and you think you saw what you saw, it doesn't mean that was the accurate story. And that was the sin of Yosef. He misinterpreted, the rabbis say, his brother's actions. And those are the two guidelines and criteria. Is when we say something negative about someone, we have to make sure we have no personal bias towards that person that's motivating our Lashon Hara. And second of all, that we actually saw what we saw and we're not misinterpreting the circumstances. Just conclude with a story that Steve Covey tells in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Successful People. He says there was once a woman going home on the train in New York on the subway system, and a man comes on the train with 4 rambunctious, wild kids, hollering, screaming, making a tumult. And the woman's like trying to read her newspaper, and she's annoyed that this guy is not controlling his kids. He's like staring into space, just daydreaming. And his kids are running, yelling, screaming. She keeps on giving him dirty looks like, why don't you tame your kids, sit them down, teach them respect? But he's like ignoring, out for lunch, as they say. Finally, the kids are jumping around on the seats, and one of the kids steps on her coat with his dirty boots from outside, from the dirty, snowy weather, and puts a nice big footprint on her beautiful coat. At this point, the woman can't handle it anymore. She opens her mouth to this guy. What's wrong with you? What kind of father are you? Kids are running around. Look what your son just did. And you just ignore it. You let your kids run around and behave this way? And the man is like shook out of his daze. And he says, I'm so sorry. He starts wiping off the coat. He says, please let me give you money for the cleaners. I apologize. And then he says, I'm so sorry, but last week my wife died of cancer. And I'm left with these 4 kids to control them. They're out of control. They miss their mother. They're acting out. And I leave work every day early to take them home from school. I come home. I'm trying to cope and manage with my grief and managing with the kids and running the house on my own. And I was just sitting there thinking about my wife and how much I miss her. And I apologize, I wasn't paying attention. And suddenly the woman is like, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. Come, let me help you. And she opens her pocketbook, starts taking out candy and giving it to the kids and say, come kids, let me sit with you. And Stephen Covey says, what happened? 1 minute she was so incensed, she was so angry at this man, she wanted to strangle him. The next minute she's filled with love and compassion for this man. And the answer is, she learned what was really going on. And sometimes we don't understand what's really going on and we misinterpret things. So we have to make sure that we know what we're seeing is true and accurate. We know all the facts, all the circumstances before we pass judgment and before we pass words that are negative about others.